Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Protect and Secure, Proactive Strategies to Manage Vulnerabilities. My name is Joe Franco. I'm a program manager here at Meritalk. Hopefully everybody is all warmed up, with Virtual Black Hat a couple weeks ago, because we're really about to dive into some excellent cyber programming today. First, I'd like to thank SYNEC, our presenting sponsor, for sponsoring this webinar and allowing us to have this great conversation. I'd also like to thank both of our speakers, as well as you, the audience, for your participation today. All right, and before we dive into the conversation, we just have a few housekeeping items for you. First, today's webinar will be recorded. An on-demand version will be available after the webinar, and we'll send each of you a note once that's available. We get this one a lot, but yes, you can watch it again. Second, throughout the conversation today, if you have something to add or a question you'd like to ask the speakers, please submit that using the Ask a Question tab at the top right of your screen. We will try to address as many of these questions as possible at the end of the presentation during a Q&A session. All you need to do is type in your question in the space and hit submit. We will get to as many of them as we can, so thank you. Finally, as we move through the topics this afternoon, we will stop to poll the audience in a few select spots. There are 3 of them. Please answer the questions as they come up on your screen. Wanted to note that if you're interested in receiving CPE credits, the continuing professional education credits, you do have to answer all 3 questions, and then you should get in touch with Shauna Haggerty from our team so that we can provide you with a certificate of completion. You can see Shauna's information there on the screen, shaunah@meritalk.com, and this will be displayed again before the end of the webinar. Great. So during the webinar today, we will aim to discuss the HHS cyber story during the pandemic. A lot has happened over the past 5 months, and we're really pleased to be joined by Janet Vogel, the CISO at HHS. We will discuss trusted partnerships across government and industry, crowdsourced security testing and its impact on government, as well as evolutions in security automation and continuous security, and much more. So I know it's going to be a great conversation. Again, we encourage you, the audience, to participate with your questions, and let's dive in. So with that, I would like to welcome our guest speakers this afternoon. First is Janet Vogel, Chief Information Security Officer at the Department of Health and Human Services. Next is Dr. Mark Kaur, who is the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of SYNEC. Janet and Mark, welcome. Thank you both for joining us today. I think to kick us off, could you each take a moment to essentially tell the audience a bit about your background? Didn't want to give your bios away to them, but how have your past few months been, and what are you doing over there? Janet, let's start with you.
Great. Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm very pleased to join you today. And this has just been an amazing few months. We are just overwhelmed here at HHS, and I've actually been at HHS for overall probably about 17 years now in CMS, and worked on the financial systems there, have been in multiple departments across the federal sector, mostly in the IT area and the CIO shop, where I've done operations, system development, and a variety of other things, now including cybersecurity. And I will say this is just the most exciting job and rewarding. It's absolutely wonderful. Love my job, love the people I work with, and just want to say, in this job, you really have to keep a sense of humor. So as we have hit the gas pedal pushed it all the way down to the floor lately, it's been a whirlwind, but it's also pushed us forward in cybersecurity in ways that some that we had imagined and some that we hadn't. So we can't be prepared for everything, and we have been able to move very quickly to shore up areas that were a surprise to us. So it's been an interesting few months. We have employed tools. We have recruited people and just done about everything you can think of to keep up with the speed of change that we're dealing with. So that's where we are today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. We're really excited to hear a lot more about that story, and I think certainly everybody understands how it is a busy time for you guys. So really, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, Mark, could you talk a little bit about yourself? Welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Janet. Glad to be on here with you. Definitely recognize this is a busy time for the agency and your mission, as we attempt to, develop out a solution for COVID-19. But in the cyber arena, this is a time where we're trying to be more proactive, right? And so I think this is an interesting topic we've got today. As Joe said, I'm the co-founder at CENAC and also the chief technology officer, so heavily involved with the product that we bring to market. At CENAC, we crowdsource the process of penetration testing, and we do that so we can recruit, retain, and vet a global community, find the best people in cyber, bring them onto our software platform, and help our customers find exploitable vulnerabilities ahead of the adversary. This is near and dear to my heart. Previous to this, I was at the National Security Agency on the offensive side of things. For signals intelligence purposes, we do have some offensive capabilities inside our government. It gives you an appreciation of what our adversaries are willing to do and how well resourced they are. And so certainly for HHS, this has been a hot topic, and how we prevent the adversaries from gaining access to information that they shouldn't have access to. And so that is nothing new, but it's certainly proving to be more in focus right now than previously before. And I'm excited to talk in this webinar about some of the things that we've observed in the last 6 months as people have moved to a more remote working style, and some of the focus has shifted towards our online connectivity to actually get work done and keep our economy moving. So we've got some interesting topics here to cover, and look forward to discussing with you guys. Thank you, Joe.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dr. Kaur. So let's do that. Let's dive right into the discussion. Janet, I wanted to start with you. So you are the CISO of one of the largest federal agencies, and one, as we discussed, whose mission is extremely important today. Can you just walk us through kind of a brief overview of how your world is looking today, maybe how the cyber threat landscape has kind of shifted since the beginning of the pandemic, and how you're responding to it now?
Yes, the recent events have impacted both the federal and the private sector. So I'll just touch on a few of the areas that we've seen the most change in. And I believe one of those is the increase in the attacks that we've seen. So this is just a harsh reality of our current times. So this surge of attacks has been against anything related to healthcare, to medical facilities. It has included hackers that are trying to exploit vulnerabilities. They can be individuals or working for a nation state, but they are trying to do things, everything from steal intellectual property, research data, cyber theft, and all sorts of things. But they're also morphing those into approaches that we had not seen before. So if we think, yep, we've got something in place, we're built on a really good foundation, we can handle this, we really do have to reinforce the cybersecurity activities that we already have. And then we also have to look at new avenues, right? So if you thought you had the front door secure and then the windows and the back door, we're also thinking, got to protect that chimney. So there's malware that has surfaced. Our agency has experienced a distributed denial of service attack, and we really learned a lot from that experience, and hope to, through multiple avenues, to share that with others in our lessons. one of the things that we've found is, and I think, Mark, you know this, that CINAC has seen about a 70% increase in activity, indicating that there is an increase in hacking across the board. So another perspective on this landscape is that we have had to become partners with our federal, state, and local and private sector organizations in a way that we never had before. So, for example, if we had a nice working relationship with an organization, we shared information, our education products, we have had to literally sit down and help them work through incidents at a more detailed level than we did in the past. If they're experiencing anything new, we'll jump in and try and help them. And the same is happening with our private sector partners. I've been so favorably impressed by the number of private sector entities that have come and said, how can we help you? And we've been able to drop the badges and figure out a solution and move forward. So we have been really blessed and working with people that and companies we never normally would have had to do. And I have a sticky note on my monitor here, and it says working together. And I keep that there just to remind me how much it takes to protect a big agency like this, or even a small organization these days, is you really have to work together. So, and the last thing I wanted to mention is we have an increasing concern about health information. This is something that is a target. It's very profitable if it's stolen, and it seems to be the new thing that lots of people really want. It's our mission to protect that, and that really protects the health information of all of Americans. We hold health information for 1 in 3 Americans. So at some point, HHS may have information on, just look around you, lots of people that you know, people in your family. So protecting that information and making sure that we can execute our mission is very critical. And this healthcare pandemic has really focused that. I think in the past, when it comes to cybersecurity, HHS wasn't thought of as a premier area. And we really enjoyed that type of anonymity in the past. Just a bit under the radar, we're moving fast, we're doing a good job. But that's all over now with COVID-19. And we are strengthening our program in many ways every day. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here at the moment.
Excellent. Thank you, Janet. And it's great to hear that point about collaboration. We have spoken to a lot of the agency CIOs recently for a series we call CIO Crossroads, and really everyone has mentioned, how the public-private partnership has been exceptional. Not so much, a business relationship and the focus on selling, but everyone, as soon as, March came around, it was, what can we do to help? Mm-hmm. So, Mark, to that point, you're someone that's worked on both sides, right, in the intelligence community. Yep. And now on the private sector side. What do you make of the way that the pandemic is changing cybersecurity? Janet mentioned that rise in hacking, and are there any new challenges that you think are coming to the forefront?
Fostering more public-private partnership, and we've seen some of that with our government customers specifically, where they're broadening their programs. As Janet mentioned, I mean, they may have enjoyed some relative anonymity in the past, but some of these agencies that hold quite a lot of taxpayer data or health information have certainly become targets for criminals, and we've seen a significant increase in phishing attacks, hacking attempts, just trying to get at this information, even basic attacks such as, brute forcing somebody's password. As we move more online and remote work becomes the standard, that remote authentication is becoming more and more important to keep secure. And so we're seeing several of our organizations that we work with, initiate, two-factor authentication changes. They're initiating pen testing on the perimeter to make sure that their perimeter security is good for things like VPNs or firewalls that block attacks. And certainly, gaining more transparency to the traffic that's going across the networks is another large initiative. Because adversaries are getting smart, they're evading their traditional defenses. They're coming in through, your employee home networks, for example, or your employees' laptops, and using that to gain privileged access. So we've seen some real creativity and some breaches that have resulted in significant data compromise, but as a direct result of people working remotely and needing to access information in a remote fashion. In addition, the remote pen testing is really in high demand right now. We at CENAC have always done remote pen testing, but certainly this is going to be the norm as people can't gather in offices, and we're struggling with an attack surface that's quite broad, and so we're seeing a lot of demand for scalable solutions where we can put lots of people into a test. And we're seeing this in critical areas like election security as one example. You've got DHS designating our elections infrastructure as critical infrastructure now, and this is going to require significant amounts of testing and continuous testing because of the amount of change that's happening over the next few months while we get ready for the next election cycle. This also is somewhat related to the quick deployment that we had to do as soon as people stopped working in offices. So, most large organizations weren't set up for 100% remote. And so there had to be a lot of quick deployments on remote work solutions, VPNs, and other internet services. And this has led to an increase in attacks on those new endpoints. Adversaries naturally, perform reconnaissance across the entire internet, and new targets look especially appetizing. Ones that were not there, the previous couple of weeks, but as soon as COVID hit and everybody went remote, new targets started popping up. And as a result of that, we've had many customers want to scale their testing to those new endpoints. And so it's certainly driving the adversary to be more creative, performing more reconnaissance, and being on the lookout for new attack surface. I guess the last thing that's kind of changed significantly is the amount of nation-state interest in some of the data that we hold, and we're seeing some of that with the FBI investigation into China's theft of vaccine research and whatnot. So there's certainly a race globally to uncover a vaccine, and that kind of race promotes the selling of vaccines, and so there's a massive business behind this. And as a result, you're going to see some governments that are inclined to get those for themselves first, take measures that breach other nations' sovereignty and security. But I'd love to get into what we're seeing as some change in the government due to the pandemic. I think that'd be a great topic to tackle next, Joe, with Janet.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark, and all great points. Janet, as Mark mentioned, right, with the adversaries probing new ways to infiltrate agency networks, kind of how has the pandemic accelerated or maybe changed some of your biggest cyber priorities?
We had in the past been the office of no. Cybersecurity was thought of as the office of no. And one of the biggest challenges is the perception of cybersecurity. So the culture and attitude around cybersecurity makes change very difficult until you hit a pandemic situation. So cybersecurity has changed recently so that it is no longer considered an inconvenience, but it's now considered a necessity, both at home and at work. And as Mark was saying, the attack surface is bigger when we moved to telework, and we had to look at more perimeter activity, detection and prevention. We had to improve our security testing, so we implemented a more crowdsourced penetration testing to make sure that we can prevent what could happen. And all of our employees have been very helpful, very thoughtful in what they're doing. So we really did double down on the activities and practices we were already doing and enhanced a lot of those. We have, as I mentioned, the bug bounty. We have built the collaboration with other federal entities that we did not have relationships with in the past. So, for example, DoD is partnering with us on several projects right now. That has been very eye-opening, and they are actually helping us bring in tools that we didn't necessarily have before. So we're expanding what we can do in advance. And I think this kind of leads into the risk that we're managing, the growth there, and then how we manage it. So priority, yeah, cybersecurity went way up in people's mind, and people have been very responsive in a way, in a speed that we hadn't seen before. And we've been talking about how important these things are for a very long time. Now, all of a sudden, everybody wants to know, K-N-O-W, not know, wants to know more how to do it. We've had to increase our education and outreach programs. We are just very active day in and day out with not only the operations, but also protecting from phishing, whale phishing, mall spam, all those kinds of things. We could not do this without pen testing. So we have to know where our vulnerabilities are and get those shored up. So our bug bounty efforts have been absolutely essential to this. So that's one of the things that we did accelerate and have put a lot more emphasis on.
Excellent. And Mark, maybe you can pull on that thread a little bit further. And Janet mentioned the partnership with DoD. I know you came from DISA as well, but are doing a lot of work with the DoD on the bug bounty side, on the active penetration testing. So could you share a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we're doing with HHS, we're seeing this across DoD and other large organizations such as Big Pharma, that the pandemic has kind of shifted, where they're willing to do testing, and they're more open to using remote pen testing solutions such as Synapse and crowdsourced solutions as well. And so what we're seeing is as you become more open to remote work, to maintain your operations and keep your mission going, you're more open to remote teams. And you're more open to these teams that can be spun up on demand dynamically and then, incentivized in a bounty model to go find exploitable vulnerabilities and really mimic that adversary. This is a recognition that talent lives everywhere, not just in the DC Beltway, not just in folks that, that can show up to your physical locations, but being able to tap into a global talent pool and harness the minds and creativity of security researchers all over the globe allows us to be our best and be the most secure organizations that we can be. And so we're seeing some embracing of that model, and some of it's just a recognition that there's a massive talent gap, and that we do have technology to connect these guys and gals remotely to this environment and allow them to do this penetration testing. But it's also a recognition that the adversary is becoming much more aggressive, and we have to, be more creative and more aggressive in our own testing. Offense is the best defense. It's an old adage, but it's definitely true. We were approached recently by some large pharmaceuticals as well that were getting an increase in attacks from China, from Russia, overseas, that really want at their vaccine research. And there was some resistance initially to a crowdsource model because you're used to doing that stuff internally. They used to have only internal networks, but this has shifted as the pandemic has pushed remote work and as we attempt to move really, really fast to develop a vaccine. And so it's been great actually to see more of an embracing of talent pools in different locations and using them in a way that allows us to be more effective and creating a more secure, collaborative environment. So, I've been really impressed, and it's been a heartwarming and positive story to see the embracing of security researchers around the world and the important work that they can do to make an impact for these organizations.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'm genuinely very, very interested in this as this model has shifted and folks, as you said, have become more open to it. Can you take us into what is the persona of a security researcher, a white hat hacker, if you will, and maybe what were the original reservations about bringing on folks like this to do penetration testing and how you're seeing that change?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in general, I'd say the security researchers are creative types, and they love solving problems, and they're motivated, mostly to find vulnerabilities that an adversary would find, and it's that puzzle, and solving that puzzle is what they enjoy, the puzzle of finding vulnerabilities. So that is at the heart, just smart people that love hard problems. But I think there was some resistance to some of these crowdsourced models, or that we saw at CINAC in the early days, at least. I'd start with trust issues. How do you trust these hackers? We get people asking us, well, they're hackers, aren't they all bad? Or are they going to steal my data? And so there is built into our model, at least, some trust verification. We know who these people are. We do some identity verification and some background checks. And frankly, I'd say that our background check process is more rigorous than the process that most people go through when hiring a full-time employee. It's quite lengthy, and we get to know these people on a personal level. And then, the other thing that, open bounty programs tend to suffer from is the lack of control. So CINAC's technology model allows us to control the testing and allows customers to stop crowdsource testing at any point in time. We also give analytics and visibility into the testing traffic. So it's a very transparent process. And I'd say that the more traditional penetration test model, where a consultant shows up at your office and does the pen test for 40 hours or 80 hours a week, whatever the contract's for, that is an old model that you have no transparency in. At the end of the testing period, they give you a PDF report, and then you're left figuring out what to do. And so we wanted to change that process and allow customers to see what was going on in real time, see the testing traffic, see the researcher findings as they flow in. So you can think of it as kind of a penetration test on demand with transparency and communication and analytics on what's going on, giving you full control to start and stop at will. And so it's really the next generation penetration test in our mind, and we're solving the talent gap by allowing freelance security researchers to join our community, go through our vetting process, and connect to provide their testing expertise to any customer around the world with a Connect Once architecture. So it really allows these folks to find a project that interests them and make money for their families and their hobbies. And at the same time provide customers with some of the best security hacking research and findings that there is in the market. So this model is going mainstream, I'd say, and what we've seen in the pandemic is that remote work is going mainstream. So as talent moves around the globe, we need to make sure that we can harness it, and we can put people to work where we need them to work.
And as we scale out our internet infrastructure, as we move more things online into the cloud, this is incredibly important that we make it a secure process. And I'm confident that we can do that with some of the crowdsourced solutions in the market.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. I think that, is a perfect segue into our first poll question of the day. So you'll see the poll here on your screen in a moment. The question is, when was the last time your agency or organization performed penetration testing? You've got a range of options here: in the past 3 months, or we automate the process; in the past 3 to 6 months; in the past 6 to 12 months; more than a year ago; or unsure. We'll give you a moment to answer the poll. Reminder, if you do want to receive CPE credits, you have to answer the polls. And you can see Shauna's contact information on the screen here as well. All right, so Janet, I want to take it back to something you mentioned earlier, right? It was in the news that HHS suffered a DDoS attack at the start of the pandemic, and obviously speculation as to why folks were trying to disrupt your network operations. But what we heard in response was that you suffered no network degradation and were essentially able to thwart that attempt. You mentioned you had a lot of lessons learned. Can you share a little more about what happened and what you learned from that time?
Yeah, I want to go back, if I could, just for a minute, onto what Mark was saying about penetration testing, and it does relate here. Mark said that it's going mainstream, and I will have to say, this has been mainstream for us for quite a while, and just our crowdsourcing pen test last year, over the last 2 years, we've had over 16,000 hours of this external penetration testing going on. That averages out to over 350 full days each year that someone somewhere is doing this penetration testing. And that's very much a part now of our continuous monitoring. So all of the findings have been closed. This really keeps us on our toes. So it's one part of what we're doing, but this has become very essential to us. So what did we learn? The denial of service attack came on us very quickly, and it ramped up faster than we really anticipated it could or would. And what we learned was we have alerts. I'm sure everybody does this. You have an alert, you see certain traffic, it sends you an alert, the volume is increased this much over time, or you're getting this type of traffic. And so we reset our alerts. So we lowered our thresholds for our alerts, and we watched, and we learned that our hackers are very astute, and they know that they learn also. And so they would see we lowered our thresholds before we kicked them out, and they would come back under the threshold. We'd see it was the same type of activity, we'd kick them out. We lowered again, they came back. We switched networks, they followed. So, we learned we need to do simple things like be very aware of the thresholds we have on our network traffic. Also, any data that could be exfiltrated, we want to manage that and manage the size so that we can see it. We have, lost my thought there because I get so involved in this. The thing is, it rose very quickly, and so we went ahead and stopped it, but we also put some forensic activities in there. This also leads to what we did with our cyber learning. We have a program we implemented called Cylens, And so we implemented machine learning to help us with this. So we could manually make all these changes and take these maneuvers to try and shake the adversary. But what we wanted to do was even a little more preventive, and we implemented some detection algorithms through the native capabilities of some of the software that we already had, so that we can see what's going on and analyze it before the traffic comes in. We are looking at analyzing email content, and we're going to expand that to look for images. So depending on what type of attack it is, we will be much more flexible and able to address that. As I mentioned, it's expanded our view, and we are implementing other types of capabilities. We've protected our network through other procurement activities and implementing additional tools. And then we are looking internally as what happens internally, because we know of lateral movement capabilities. We are looking at if something's inside our perimeter, what do we do there? Those are some of the things that we've acted and reacted on. And at the same time we were doing this, there was the pandemic was declared and there was more telework. So we were able to look across and also implement some of these things just specifically focused on telework. This has been an amazing learning opportunity. So far, so good, but I knock on wood when it comes to cybersecurity. So those are some of the things I would suggest others think about.
Yeah, it's a good point, Jeanette. I think the focus on email-based threats is really important as well. It shouldn't be overlooked. Certainly, hackers are trying to get in through your network devices and your external applications. But we've definitely seen, in the last January to April period, a huge spike in the number of spam messages and emails with malicious URLs that mimic either health authorities or impersonating government or impersonating partners. It's certainly a common attack vector.
Excellent. And now, Mark, Janet also mentioned kind of some of the innovative applications of machine learning that they're using to kind of stay ahead of where folks are going. What are you seeing on the industry side there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it kind of goes back to the talent gap, right? You have to find ways to scale your human talent in more effective ways. And just like Jeanette mentioned, I mean, there's a lot of algorithms that can be put in place on either network security alerts or machine data generated from your endpoint agents that allow you to focus your time on areas of concern and more important things than just chasing the alert after the alert. The reality is in the cybersecurity market, we have, followed a defense in depth strategy for the last 20 years, and that has resulted in numerous back-end systems for tracking security related events. And so, you're seeing the introduction of ML and AI in an attempt to solve that problem that we kind of created for the industry here. So you may have multiple systems detecting the same event at different points in the network. That could be a network event tied to an endpoint event, tied to a perimeter, control. I mean, all of those would fire different alerts. And so a lot of these ML and AI solutions are looking at the chaining of those alerts and trying to synthesize a real event from that, tied back to a real actor or real compromise. And so that's where the technology focus has been. What we're doing specifically to SYNAC and what we're doing with some of our customers is we're actually scaling out perimeter scanning and using machine learning to identify vulnerabilities that could be exploitable by an adversary. And so, let's say we go out there and we find 10,000 perimeter vulnerabilities. We would be able
to focus the remediation teams on just the important things, and maybe narrow that list down to 50 items. And so it just cleans up that signal to a point where you can actually manage the workload, and focus on the most important problems first. And that's where this technology is going to help us going forward, is synthesizing data across multiple disparate systems and helping us prioritize based upon indicators of compromise or indicators of exploitability by adversaries. And that's where you would integrate things like threat intel, or in our case, we see vulnerabilities exploited across the world. And if we see something, a certain product being exploited in Europe, and we see that across, that same product in use across our existing customers in the United States, we'll issue a bulletin and go after that proactively. And that's kind of where you're using data to your advantage. And that's one of the advantages of having, a crowd and also machine intelligence combined in one solution. And that's where the industry is going to try to focus, make this more efficient.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. I do want to dive into that further, but first we should move to our second poll question of the day. And as you understand, this is the middle of the pandemic. Everybody's working from home, so you get the authentic sounds in the background here if you can hear this lawnmower. Poll question number 2. How would you grade your agency or organization's ability to manage and respond to cyber vulnerabilities on a scale from A to F, where A is excellent and F is failing? Let us know what you think. Please note all answers are anonymous. We are not storing your responses, linking them back to you, and telling your boss. We'll give you a moment to answer, and then we'll continue. Excellent. Thank you. Now, continuing on that train of thought, Janet, Mark had mentioned a little bit about prioritization of risk, right? Looking at all the different vulnerabilities and factors. I had actually attended a session of yours at RSA this year, which ended up being probably our last big hurrah in terms of an in-person cyber conference before the world turned on its head, right? And there you talked a little bit about the Enterprise Risk Management Council at HHS and how IT security was now officially being recognized as risk across the range of the HHS agencies, and you were working on solutions to discuss enterprise-wide risk. Can you tell us a little bit about that and also this process of prioritizing risk?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you consider risk as something unwanted that could happen, if you don't take steps now to prevent it, you'll realize how much risk management we do in our own lives every day. So, for example, you wear a seatbelt when you get in a car to protect yourself. In cybersecurity, we set up access, identity rules, controls to prevent damage to our systems. So in taking a risk-based approach for this as part of our entire enterprise risks, it really has integrated a component that wasn't there before. So in the fall of 2019, the HHS Enterprise Risk Management Council accepted a recommendation to add the Chief Information Security Officer as a voting member of that council. So now we have the CIO and the CISO as members of the council. This council represents all of our operating divisions across the department. So NIH, FDA, CDC, ACL, they all have a seat at the table, as do some of the functional areas like acquisition, finance, that type of thing. So by bringing the CISO or cybersecurity perspective in, we are able to talk to more people than we were in the past and get that two-way exchange that really helps us understand how to put cybersecurity into their business function so that they are more secure in what they do. We have a perspective now as we work through our risk prioritization that specifically calls out cybersecurity. So we have a risk framework, and we evaluate all these risks on a regular basis as to what is the likelihood of the risk. We look at what is our appetite for risk. So in some areas, we may want to take a little bit more risk and do things differently. In others, we may not want to do that. And then we prioritize based on that official assessment. So part of what that does is some of our members on that council are also members for the HHS Management Council, and they may also sit on our funding Service and Supply Fund board. So there's that information that they didn't have before, where they can consider cybersecurity. And they can also help make some funding decisions as to where to place an emphasis and also add funds, which is always an interesting challenge in the federal government. So all the puts and takes now include cybersecurity. We are very excited to move ahead. One of the things that happened was COVID-19. Our Risk Management Council got back together, and we put that as a priority. So the pandemic response as a priority required input from all of the functional areas and many of our operating divisions. They coordinated, we reprioritized, and they were able to move forward. So it's really becoming a part of the fabric of how we work and how we protect all of our business at HHS.
Excellent. And that's really great to hear, Janet. So Mark, similar question to you. Kind of how are you advising your enterprise clients on how to assess and prioritize risk and then decide where to apply those resources, provided you get that funding boost?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's a little more cut and dry, right? I mean, we're coming in from an external perspective, performing these aggressive pen tests with, a crowd of security researchers. And, we prioritize things by what we gain access to. So if we exploit your Active Directory server and can take control of your domain, I mean, that's a big problem. So, what we're doing is using the data that we gain access to, the type of exploit that we've been successful in throwing, we use that to guide the severity rating of what our customers receive in their vulnerability reports. And so by the time we get done with a report that's gone through multiple quality checks and full steps to reproduce and even a recommendation of how to fix it, our customers are left with a stack ranked list of issues where they're able to easily go through and get after it. And we have partners that can help with fixing it as well. But this is definitely a case where I would give some kudos out to Janet and her team, because they've as these vulnerabilities come in, they're one of our enterprise customers that fix them the fastest and really scale out the fixes and roll them across the enterprise super quick with very high efficacy. So I think that is impressive in such a large organization. We don't always see that, and when it comes to fixing serious flaws in the network, it's just super important to do that quickly. And HHS has proven that it is possible even in large organizations. And I think that all of us can take some lessons learned from that and how we prioritize our work in favor of things that really make a difference.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Kaur. That's a glowing endorsement there of HHS and the work you guys are doing together. All right, everyone, I think we will move to our third poll question of the day. Following that, we are going to open up to audience Q&A. We have had a few questions coming in, so we will get to those. Great, so poll question number 3. When will the use of machine learning have a significant impact on the government's ability to detect and respond to cyber threats? Option A is it's already having significant impact. B is in the next year, in the next 2 to 3 years, or it's still several years away. I'll wait just a little bit to happy to answer this question, and then we will continue. So as we move into Q&A here, Janet and Mark, thank you both for your insights. We're going to turn it over to the audience. We did have some questions coming in. A reminder to folks, click on the Ask a Question tab. It's in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You can type your question in the space and click Submit, and it'll be routed to us right away. Taking a look, the first question from the audience, and this is for you, Janet. What is the biggest challenge you see in the HHS department when it comes to applying these new methods of security? Challenges.
Well, part of our challenge is really around the complexity. So we have a federation of organizations that do very different types of business that have their own funding, and they have their own business models. That makes it very complex to come up with a single solution or a single answer. So we've learned we have to be very flexible. We have to all have the same goal, which is we are currently very in tune with the goals for cybersecurity. And then we have to let each of the operating divisions implement that in the way that works best for their business model and their customers. So they may vary on an approach a little bit, but we do have some common threads. And I'll mention the Continuous Diagnostic and Mitigation Program from DHS. CDM, we have the same goals, we have similar tools, and how we implemented it was we can see things from the department level, but they're operated at the operating divisions. So for us, it's how do we make it effective while being flexible and still meeting our central management requirements. Right now, we're in a fairly good place with all of this, and don't see that changing. We're trying out new tools, new activities all the time, and we're looking for measurable results, and of course, getting our FISMA scores and FITARA scores to keeping them at a good level while we're doing all this new work.
Excellent. Thank you. We have another question from the audience, and I will open this up to both of you. They're asking, in addition to pen testing, what's your view on threat hunting or other means to have a more proactive security stance?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in there. Yeah, threat hunting is good, right? It's that, just to define it for everybody, that's where you're going through your log system and you're proactively looking for adversaries that are in your network. And, that makes the assumption that you've already been breached, that you've already got somebody rooting around that shouldn't be. So it's kind of a defeatist model in some ways, but, I personally, I think it's good. It's part of it. But I really think, especially in federal government and large enterprises, I think continuous security testing is one of the best things you can do versus the point in time. We get hung up on these control frameworks and the spreadsheets and whatnot, and things like risk management framework, for example. I think it's time to dump some of these in favor of more aggressive continuous security testing. And if you look at what HHS has done, I think they set a good example toward this. We don't need to generate more paperwork for the sake of paperwork. We need to focus on technology solutions that allow us to, check for all the items in our risk management frameworks. But we don't need to send people down down to do this work that should be done automatically and done by computers. In addition, I think it's critical in your security organization to just, hire the right people. It's important that you hire the right folks that look forward, not backwards in terms of like how we've done things. It's clearly the future demands that we operate a bit differently at a faster pace to keep up with our adversaries and be more scalable in the work that we do with with even smaller team sizes potentially. And so, getting the right leadership in place for your cybersecurity org or your, even your IT organization is super important.
Well, Janet, any thoughts on that topic as well?
Well, I agree with that. In addition, we have to look at the return on our time, the investment of our time and our funding. And so we've tried to set up some measures that help us know, are we really, again, back to the prioritization, but on a smaller scale, are we prioritizing our efforts? And I think, and I'll just say, crowdsourced penetration testing has provided measurable results in reducing our risk. So sometimes threat hunting is really a good thing. We'll have a team that will actively engage. It just depends on the circumstances and the threat. And I always advocate for more and more analysis than less. So I think I mainly agree with everything that Mark has already said.
Excellent. And so I wanted to say to the audience, thank you for all of your questions. We are coming up on time here. What we will do is pass along your questions to our presenters today as well. So before we go, I did want to open it up to closing statements. Mark, any last words you'd share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just encourage everybody to take a fresh look at how they're doing business. And as we attempt to do more remotely and as we attempt to do more with smaller teams, it's important that we take a fresh look at how we're approaching vulnerability management, how we're approaching, IT and asset management. Everything up and down the stack kind of needs a fresh look to set us up for the future. It's 2020 going into 2021 shortly, and we need to prepare for more devices on the internet than ever before and more remote work. So keep an eye toward the future.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. And Janet, any closing words?
Yeah, I would just encourage everybody. The perspective of cybersecurity is changing, and every individual, is so important. You are on the front line, and if you see something, bring it up. Please do that. And I always encourage people, change your password. Now I have to say change your password and wash your hands. So thank you for the time today, and I'm available for any other questions that you might have. If you go ahead and send them, we'll help.
Awesome. Thank you, Janet. Change your password, wash your hands for 20 seconds. I really like that. You got it. Great. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is just a reminder about CPE credits. If you did answer all 3 polling questions today and want to receive those CPEs, please contact Shauna Haggerty so we can provide you a certificate of completion. It's there on the screen. I will spell it, SHAWNAH, @meritalk.com. And now, thanks again, Janet and Mark. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for the conversation. Of course, thank you to the audience members. Thank you as well to our sponsor, SYNEC, for their support. If you did miss anything today, or if you want to review the materials that were presented, we're posting a recording of this webinar, and we will send it out to all of you once this is over. Thanks again. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Be well.